Now, although Arsenal haven't even wrapped up the striker situation yet, it is time to talk about potential wingers joining. Now, someone we've spoke about over the last couple of weeks has been Rodrygo, but after looking at him even more, I think he would be an excellent signing for Arsenal because he will change something very unique about the club. But what is that? So let's get into it. Now, if any of you watched my video about Rodrygo a few weeks ago, you will know overall I was not the most positive on him given the price, but I still said that he was a very good player. Now, the reason why I said this is because the winger that Rodrygo is an inside forward type, and even by his statistics of picking the ball up, his shots he has in the box, and where he runs when he picks it up coming inside rather than going on that outside all the time and even being efficient in them areas, it reminded me a lot like Martinelli, but a much better player. And he still does remind me is very much the same style as Martinelli. People have criticised maybe Arteta's tactics of Martinelli over the last couple of years, how he's an inside player and he's been used as a wide forward, too far away from the goal, not being effective in that final third. And although I do think Rodrygo is a better carrier, a better dribbler, and much better in deeper areas, I still think when you make him run the entire way with the ball, you get the same problems. Him going to the byline, crossing it to no one, or struggling to get the ball from real deeper and actually improve the team, which is something I have worried about. Now, because of this and the price that was resulted in getting him around 70 to 80 million pounds on 300k a week wages, and then we've still got to convince him to come over teams like Chelsea and teams abroad, I just felt like overall the package wasn't very good and felt like Arsenal could probably get better value for money other places in the market, and not only that, better players that will probably help the team in actual tactical ways. Now, despite saying this, I went back and looked at a lot of Rodrygo's tapes because I wanted to see if maybe Arsenal had seen something different from the player that I had seen, or something that wasn't maybe so obvious to the eye that he could be useful at the club, because that's what you've got to think about. Useful abilities around the squad is what we really aim for, with people like Havertz and Mourinho being probably better in not the position they were signed in. Now, this is when I started really thinking of a lot of ideas around Rodrygo, and I know I'm not the only one. I know a lot of people have spoken about it, but if he is better in these central areas, I think Arsenal need to get the best out of him in these areas as well. Now, the first way of doing this, which a lot of people have spoken about, has been the potential of buying an overlapping left back. On the stream the other day, we spoke about the need for one of these players, and that allows someone to basically hold his width, hold a player outside of him so he can come inside even more, and it gives him that little bit of space. We saw Fury come in for this for a lot of our wingers like Martinelli in the first place, but his reliability issues and injury haven't been great. And we've also seen links to other wing backs such as De Cooper in the Belgium league who could also do that. Now, I do think there is still a need for Arsenal to buy an overlapping left back. I don't think the market is exactly perfect. You've got Moreno from Strasbourg who could be a good option, maybe Gutierrez, but now he looks like he's off to Napoli, would have been a good option as well. And even then, they're not cheap. 25-30 mil for some of these players that realistically aren't going to play a lot when we've already got Mars and Fury and maybe Tomiyasu when he comes back there. And this isn't just the problem with Rodrygo. I think a lot of the Arsenal transfer rumours over certain players have kind of been limited to this role as well. People like Lookman and even Rashford in many ways are these players that are sort of inside forwards and prefer to come inside and kind of play within the box, which I do think can work, but sometimes I think in bigger teams like Arsenal, who need a lot more build-up and other pressure on the ball, we need a little bit more than that. Now, we spoke about it in yesterday's video about the Rice and Zubimendi partnership, but when Arsenal attack, we are still very heavily catered towards that right hand side. Now, with Real Madrid actually last season, they were catered very much to the left. Obviously, Rodrygo playing on the right with Vinny playing on the left with Mbappe. Obviously, given their players, this makes sense, but also it showed that Rodrygo was that sort of island player a lot of the time, on the edge of the box waiting for the goals to happen. Now, this is great because they had undeniable players going forward and they create chances, and even then Real Madrid weren't the best attacking team in the world last year. So Rodrygo is getting a lot of his shots away within the box and closer to the goal, and even sometimes when he gets to play off that left, we have seen a little bit more explosiveness from him, especially from shots outside the box cutting inside, which obviously would have been great for Arsenal in the first place. Now, when Martinelli's in these areas, I think people have complained heavily about his dribbling. His decision making in these moments seems quite one-dimensional. He kind of does the same thing over and over again, and ultimately his shooting has not been very good over the last couple of years. Now, compared to Rodrygo in these moments, he will be a better player. He will get better shots away. He can actually shoot from outside the box as well, and his dribbling will take one or two players on, where players around him such as Rice or whoever we have in that left centre mid making the runs inside will have a lot of benefits from Rodrygo having the ball. I have no doubt about that. Now, the problem is it still makes us quite heavily reliant on the right. Obviously, Zubimendi coming in, so maybe adaptations to how the midfield works might change that as well. But we still need, in my opinion, someone like Calafiori or Miles to be very effective in them forward areas, which could be a problematic thing for the counter-attack, especially with Zubimendi's legs and maybe needing Rice in that double pivot. So obviously buying an overlapping left back would probably be the best idea. You could probably move Miles into maybe a left 8 substitute role. What does that do for Marino? There's a lot of players you have to ask. But Calafiori can overlap if he needs to. He creates chaos in their moments and will always help the player. And so can Miles. I think he's been developing it over a few times. And we've seen him go on the overlap deeper and help many times as well. So it's not like they can't do it. They aren't just that really electric pace merchant who can run past and cross the ball in. They haven't really got that crossing level right now. Now, with that being maybe an unrealistic way of getting Rodrygo to work, I was trying to think of other ideas we could as well. And maybe it is something as simple as putting him in the central areas more, and maybe even in possession having him in them areas more importantly. Now, I've spoken about the box midfield and I don't want to keep going on about it because I know I talk about it a lot. But when you play a box midfield, it is actually a 2-and-2, and the 4 that run together have moved very quickly. Now, I do think this would have to be adapted a little bit to how we play now, especially with our intent pressing off the ball in big games. But not only have we spoke about the Rice and Jorginho, now Rice and Zubimendi partnership in the deeper areas, in the attacking areas, it was always Odegaard and Havertz, our two best pressers off the ball in the team, our two best herders. They get other people to do the dirty work but win the ball back, and are very good at managing tempo of when to actually press and when to sit off people, which makes us a very successful pressing team overall. Now, Rodrygo, yet again, does not necessarily have that pressing level that someone like Havertz or Odegaard has, but he does try really hard. We saw it against us. He really did try to get back in his unfamiliar position, out of possession, you could argue, and even then, they did not help him. He had 2 players on him the whole time, but he has showed quite a lot of transferable skills in deeper areas. There's also clearly been a way that he has become a bit of a squad player at Real Madrid in terms of doing the dirty work. Last season, he actually had the most touches he's ever had in the defensive third and his own box, way more than he had all the other seasons, and in the attacking third he actually had over 100 less than he did the year before. So it's quite clear he even himself is picking the ball up in defensive areas, which isn't really relevant to the pressing but could show he has that defensive work rate to even try and press in the first place, which I'm sure Rodrygo does have by looking at his mentality that he showed throughout his career. Now, if you had Rodrygo in this sort of box formation, it does mean you'd have to have someone else on that left wing side. You could arguably have Rodrygo come inside from that left and not even really have anyone on that left hand side and maybe push Miles up, which I think could work, or Calafiori in that way. But Rodrygo being a more central place early on would be much better for him. He can play as like a sort of secondary striker or even a centre forward type, where he can work off someone like Havertz, Šeško, whoever we sign, and not only create from the edge of the box little passes where he's not the best creator, but I actually think around these areas, if he gets the ball more, he'll be better, and more importantly, get shots away. He's prolific in them central areas and very much more clinical than someone like Martinelli. This could make sure Arsenal don't need to have him in the team. And when we talked about yesterday about how is this midfield going to work with the attacking midfielder, arguably in certain ways as well, out of possession, in possession, he can play as that attacking midfielder a little bit behind the striker. They can also rotate, and also I like something about Rodrygo is that he runs in behind a lot, so you could get Šeško to come deeper or Havertz to come deeper and him to run in off that, which I do think gives us a little bit more adaptation, especially from longer goal kicks where we know Havertz and Šeško can head the ball on. And I think overall this just gets the best attributes that Rodrygo has. I think his ball striking is really good. He needs more shots in better areas. His dribbling is his best thing in the central areas where we can run through. He can bait players towards him a little bit like what Jesus used to do for the club, hopefully a little bit more clinical and even then working in off a 2. And it also will allow Arsenal to focus a lot more on that central play and can kind of use that left wing as a secondary attack if we need to. As if the attack breaks down, we can pass it off there with a late runner from someone like Calafiori or Miles in there. Now, the repercussions of making this decision would mean that someone like Odegaard would be out of the team. How's that going to do for the pressing in the future? future. Also think that we should give him a go in that 10 anyway. Or you can get an attacking midfielder sort of type player that can cover on that left wing and swap with Rodrygo in the possession base to do this. Now, in order to do this, you want someone that's not the best presser, who can play out wide and is also more importantly right-footed and likes that left wing, which unfortunately a lot of our attacking midfielders like the other side, which would be a bit of a conflict of interest with Rodrygo, but could still work. But that is a little bit more complicated because obviously Saka will most likely be starting. Now, I do think Rodrygo would work with Martinelli actually, and I think that would absolutely be fine. I also think Rodrygo on the left generally would be a better upgrade of Martinelli. The system won't be entirely better, but we can develop Miles to be a little bit more overlapping, or Calafiori to do that. I get that we don't really want Miles to be in them positions, rather have him centrally. That's where he is the best. And that is really why I've kind of had a feeling that he might work. Now, that obviously is quite a lot, and that wouldn't necessarily be my incomplete judgment on a player, but also given the market, which is another major part of this, I think there's not necessarily much going on in that winger market that I'm too excited about. I kind of agree that a striker does help the tactics a lot, but not as much as a winger. You could arguably talk about Arsenal just needing a striker that sits in the box sometimes, and I've said this with Šeško many times, that he will come deeper and work with the ball, but I'm not really worried about that. Just get into the box, make runs in behind. That's all we need sometimes. And for a winger, it's a little bit different. We can't really rely on our winger to have these sort of lesser requirements, because we need to be a much more balanced team, and you need to pick the ball up from deeper and be able to pass the ball off. So this is why Nico Williams, even with a Šeško, with his crossing and how he plays deeper, would work even better than Rodrygo. But he isn't as good as a player. The amount of money that he's on as well and wants is incredible. 300k a week is not worth it for the player he is and the money you have to play up front. And the rest of the market isn't really moving in many good ways. Barcola is definitely a shout. We're seeing more rumours of him in certain clubs, and I think Barcola should be considered as that wide player that also is just undeniably fast, which is something as well we need desperately. And then we're looking at people like Leao, Semenyo, which we have question marks on work rate, pace, ability to start in different ones. And then you're getting into really the backups. But ultimately, these players aren't necessarily that star player we need. And with Šeško coming in, we've bought a player that is much more tactical based within the squad than a Gyökeres if he does come in. So I think we can afford to bring a Rodrygo in who will improve on Martinelli, but also more importantly, we can use him in these funky ways. And I'm sure that Arteta will be thinking about these ways to use him and see the platform that he has, and he clearly works very hard to be so good. And ultimately, there's a level of just stacking quality, and I do think Rodrygo is probably the best winger on the market that Arsenal could get. And sometimes all these little details aren't as important as just getting the player in, which is somewhat Arsenal need to do in this metric. Now, let me know what you guys think overall about the Rodrygo move. This will probably be the last time I speak about him for a while. I'll probably speak about him on stream. I do more streams over the week. So if you want to see them, please go and check out them on my channel. But thank you guys for watching. Appreciate you guys as always, and I'll see you in the next one.